Hey everyone, welcome back to Wicked Deeds. We're your hosts. I'm Brittany.
And I'm John.
And today we're traveling back to Rhode Island to discuss a case where a young woman who had been missing for weeks was found murdered with a gunshot wound to her head. With the circumstances surrounding her death being odd and the details of the investigation lacking, the current detective has made it known that the public's assistance may be the key to finding justice 45 years later. Today's case is about the murder of Lyla Poitras. Lyla Poitras was born and raised in Limestone, Maine. She lived with her parents, Joyce and Oscar, and also had 3 siblings, Robert, Helen, and Scott. There isn't too much out there about Lyla's early life, but we do know that at some point in her young adult life, presumably her early 20s, she moved from Maine down to the Rhode Island, Massachusetts area. She'd gotten a job at Aetna Life and Casualty Insurance Company, with her work location being in Fall River, Massachusetts. At some point, and unfortunately, I can't really figure out exactly when, but I assume in the late 60s, early 70s, Lyla met her future husband, William Souza, who was a man that lived in Middletown, Rhode Island. Which, if you aren't familiar with Rhode Island and the surrounding states, it's only about a 25-minute drive from Fall River where Lyla worked. So I can only assume the couple probably met frequenting the local area. But either way, they got married and bought a home in 1973, located at 70 Cynthia Avenue in Tiverton, Rhode Island, which was just over the Massachusetts border. Their house was quaint and modest, only a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and just under 1,000 square feet. Even so, it seems as though this would be the perfect first home for the couple and a great place to live, with Lyla's job being literally just over the state line in Fall River. Unfortunately, though, marital bliss did not last very long for the young couple, and they would soon divorce in 1975. I've done my best to try and find anything I can on the divorce proceedings and if they were amicable or contentious, but I've come up pretty empty in that department. I do know, though, that Lyla seemed to have kept the house as she was living in it for at least 2 years after the couple had split, and based on a public records search, it looks as though the home was deeded into Lyla's name in 1976, which we know was a year after the two had officially divorced.
Did they buy the house together?
Yes, they did buy the house together.
Okay.
Now, after the divorce, Lyla was still working for Aetna Life and Casualty Insurance Company and seemed to be getting back on her feet. She's been described as being very happy and just overall having a great life. Her job seemed to be going pretty well, and she'd even met a new man and was in what's believed to be a good relationship. Also, at the time, Lyla had 2 cats whom she loved very much, and she's been described as an animal person. She absolutely adored animals, and even the most widely used picture of her in her case is one where she's holding a guinea pig. People close to her have said that she would often pick up stray animals and keep them rather than bringing them to the pound or trying to find them new homes.
It's understandable that people love animals. Obviously, we love animals.
Yeah.
But when you're taking in all these animals and stuff like that, and there's an overabundance of them, it often seems that you're trying to fill some type of void in your life.
Oh, for sure. I'll completely agree with that one.
So maybe it was like kids. Maybe she really wanted kids. But because she had gotten divorced and that didn't work out, she was now seeing this new guy, but she still had that want or something like that where she was trying to take on these animals and take care of them because she didn't have whatever else she wanted in her life yet.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there, but I also think about, too, like she probably had to be very particular with what animals she was bringing home too. I mean, her house was only like 950 square feet. You're not fitting a lot of animals in there without like a hoarding type situation. So
very true.
The 2 cats make sense.
Like dead cats in the freezer.
John!
You've seen the Hoarders episode though?
No.
Oh my God. There's this one where the lady, same thing, always took in animals.
Yeah.
Had, and I might be exaggerating, but I think like dozens of dogs, dozens of cats, so many so that she couldn't take care of them all.
That's so unhealthy.
Like when they went in there to clean the house out, they were picking up like couches and finding dead animals under the couches. It was nasty. But then they went into the freezer and they were like frozen dead cats because I don't know if this was exactly it, but I think she was like, oh, that was like my first cat. I didn't want to get rid of him. I couldn't let him go or something like that.
Oh my God.
So that's like one end of the extreme where, yeah, I want to take animals. I take way too many in. Not saying that this is what she was like.
Oh my
but,
God, that's horrifying.
Yeah, it's like, talk about hoarder situation.
Seriously. But anyway, on the evening of Monday, June 27th, 1977, Lyla was at home with her boyfriend. And I've tried my best to find this guy's name, but it seems as though it's never been reported publicly, so I don't have a name for you. But regardless, the couple was together at her home on Cynthia Avenue watching the Red Sox game. It's been reported that Lyla's boyfriend left her house sometime around midnight that night. But after this, it's entirely unclear what takes place from midnight on June 27th until 2 days later, June 29th. So those 2 days go by, and Lyla's neighbor noticed something odd. The outside light on Lyla's house had been on for a while now, and it was on like all day long. It could totally be nothing, and maybe she just forgot, but the fact that Lyla's car had still been in the driveway sparked further concern for her. And I'm just thinking, if Lyla had been home with her boyfriend the night of the 27th, that was a Monday. So it makes sense that he would leave around midnight so she could get enough sleep for work the next day. But now, considering that 2 days later, her car is still in the driveway, in the middle of the week, and hasn't moved in days, I mean, that's definitely weird.
Yeah, when you put together the fact that the car hasn't moved, but also the lights are constantly on, maybe she was sick, and that's why the car hadn't moved.
Yeah.
But why would you leave the outside light on 24 hours a day? If she was sick in the house, she would have shut the light off.
Exactly, yeah.
If she wasn't home, she would have shut the light off. But now the fact that you have the car there
Yep.
and the light on,
Yep.
the two don't mix, so yes, something seems to be up.
Exactly. So due to the strange circumstances, this neighbor, whose name is Claudette, had her husband go over to Lyla's house to check on her and see what was up. When he walked up to the house, he realized that not only was the outside light on, but so were the lights in the house, and the TV was on as well.
Again, strange, because if she was home watching TV, the outside light probably would have been shut off.
Exactly, yes. And I have to think too, I don't know, maybe this is just a random comment, but now she's single, technically. Like, she's living single. She had been divorced. This is 1977 now, so she's been divorced for 2 years. It's only her and a single income with this house now, even though she had bought it with her ex-husband. So now she's down to one income. You would probably think, like, she's not going to want to waste electricity. So it's probably like something to say like, I mean, in 1977, maybe Claudette was like, that girl is going to have a high electric bill if she keeps doing that, you know?
I think back at 77, it was more not Claudette worrying about her expenses, but nosy neighbors. Like,
True,
as opposed to being in the house watching 1,000,001 streaming services or on your phone or something like that. You're out, you're sitting on the porch, sitting on a chair outside watching the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I'm sure these small things like a light being on or a car not moving, those are the things that people back in the day would have picked up on a lot easier because, like, even now, we know our neighbors, but we don't know our neighbors. 77, everybody probably knew their neighbors
exactly
on a personal level.
Yes. So I was just going to say that too, is like, I don't pay attention to what our neighbors do. I'm too busy with my other stuff inside my own house. So it's like, I can see what you're saying with the nosy neighbor thing though.
Yeah. But even still, like on the front of our house, we have those lights that come on when it gets dark and they go off when it's light out.
Yep.
If for days those lights never came on, our neighbors probably would be like, the front of their house is always lit up.
And now
it's not. That's weird.
Yeah, definitely.
So it could have been as simple as that, something just catching her eye, and she's like, oh, we should go check on her.
Hey, it's a good thing to catch, though, because you have to think, too, like, her family's in Maine. No one's around to really check up on her. So that's a good neighbor.
And she's divorced. Maybe they know that she's seeing a new guy.
Yeah.
You know, people worry about their neighbors, or people worry about their friends. And again, assuming back in 77, your neighbors were probably your friends. Yeah,
no, that makes perfect sense. So Claudette actually spoke to Turn to 10 News years later and explained what happened that night to them. She stated, quote, I got suspicious. We hadn't seen her car move in a couple of days. So I told my husband, go over, see if you can see anything. So he peeked in her bedroom window, saw her TV was on, and nobody was around. And that's when we called police and told them, end quote.
It's an interesting window to choose.
The bedroom window.
So we were suspicious that night, so we had him go over there, and he peeked in her bedroom window. It's like,
I think it's
go knock on the front door, go look in the kitchen window, a big picture window or something.
Well, I think
maybe the TV was on in the bedroom, and through the window you could see that there was action happening in the room.
Yes. So what
And
I'm
that's why he
thinking
went
is
there.
like maybe other blinds were closed or
Right.
something. Maybe she hadn't closed her bedroom blinds. Maybe that was the only one open. I think it's harmless, but
I
it's
just
just
think it's
like
funny.
the way it was said.
Yeah.
Police arrived on scene a short time later to perform what I would assume would be a well-being check. Once they got there, they noticed the same peculiar things that Claudette and her husband had, specifically that Lila's car was still in the driveway and it was locked up tight. Now, after authorities arrived, they somehow were able to gain access into Lila's house, but I honestly have no idea how that's possible without destroying the door or windows since they obviously didn't have a key.
Yeah, it can go either way. I mean, maybe they just didn't say in the news that something was destroyed. But when you're performing a well-being check and say you have the fire department involved, they have things that can essentially spread the door frame to make it easier to push a door open.
Okay.
Or think about things that we can still do today ourselves, depending on how a lock is facing or a door handle is facing. If there's no deadbolt, maybe they could have carted in.
Oh, true.
Got in.
Yep.
But there are multiple different avenues to gain access to the house without causing serious damage, at least.
Okay, so what if, say, this is just an example, not necessarily in this case, say the police arrived and they were able to see in a window that the husband wasn't able to, and say they saw like a crime scene. Would they just like smash a window open or break a door down at that point to be like, oh my God, somebody's injured or there's blood everywhere or something like that?
Yeah, if they can see somebody in serious distress or, God forbid, dead, they can get in there as fast as possible if they need to. But generally, if police and fire are on scene together, they can get in there without totally demolishing property.
Yeah.
I guess it all kind of depends on how this call came in. Because if this just came into the police and they were like, oh, I haven't seen my neighbor in a couple days, can you go by and check on her? It could have been only police that would be dispatched to it.
Yeah.
Usually there needs to be a more urgent matter, like knowing somebody's in the house, knowing somebody's in distress, for both to be dispatched together.
Yeah.
But do you know who get dispatched to this?
I don't know. I think it was just police. It's kind of like what you were just saying, where it wasn't this huge deal. Like they didn't know for sure that something was wrong. It was just kind of strange. Just be like, hey, can you come check on her? Like, I don't know if she's in there. It doesn't seem like she is. So I don't think it was this crazy urgent. Get police, get fire, get everyone,
So calls come in even nowadays where a neighbor is worried about one of their neighbors. Say it's like an elderly person that lives by themselves and you see them on the floor or something like that. You're just going to get in there any means possible in order to hopefully help them if they've just fallen or whatever.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Once authorities gained entry, there were a few things that stood out. First of all, Lila's purse was still in the house, as was her driver's license, her contact lenses, her glasses, and I believe her main set of keys. It seems as though the only thing missing was a spare set of what I believe to be house keys. So I can only assume that her regular ones, like the ones with the car keys attached, were still in the home. Outside of that, there was no sign of any sort of struggle in the house, and things seemed to be relatively untouched. But her 2 cats had been left in the house and hadn't been taken care of since at least the 27th when Lyla was last seen.
So I would assume that they were probably like all over the people that got in the house, like begging for food type thing, for them to determine that they hadn't been taken care of for a couple days.
I would assume so. I would guess that there probably wasn't like food in their bowls, probably no water, litter box is full. I'm sure that that's probably where the determination came from.
So it seems as though she's not here.
Yes, exactly. She is not here, but her car is, and all of her at least important belongings are.
And there's no forced entry into the house outside of what first responders may have done, and it's all locked up.
Exactly. And she even, well, you would assume if the spare set of keys is missing that maybe she took those.
Yeah, maybe they were her ex-husband's and they're just the spare set.
Yeah, definitely possible. Now, when first looking at everything, it just didn't make sense to authorities, or really anyone for that matter, that Lyla would have just run off, especially because all of her personal belongings and her car were left at home. And as police began their investigation into Lyla's disappearance, they soon discovered that she hadn't been to work in several days. From what I can tell, she was most likely at work that Monday, the 27th, the day that she was last seen, but hadn't been seen or heard from at work since. Which, I mean, that's obvious to me because her car was still at home, but I do also find it incredibly strange that her employer wouldn't have called anyone that she knew or Lyla herself to try and get in touch with her to find out, like, hey, why did you no-call, no-show?
Yeah, especially if she wasn't the type to, like, miss work or no-call, no-show, like you said. You would think that her employer would have some type of emergency contact.
Yes, exactly, and she's been described as reliable and punctual.
And I'm sure they tried to call her house. They probably didn't get an answer. So when you can't get in touch with this employee that no-call, no-shows now, you would think the next logical step would be to reach out to the emergency contact.
Yeah, even if it's still the ex-husband, or maybe she changed it, maybe it's the boyfriend now. Like, did they even try and call anyone? Because it doesn't seem that way. So I don't know. It was definitely strange.
And she worked a good job. It was Aetna Life Insurance, so it wasn't like she was a cashier at, a gas station or something.
Yeah, definitely. And the detective working the case, too, had said, quote, "That was key to the case. She never called out sick. She always showed up to work on time," end quote.
Yeah, it seems oftentimes with these cases that we cover, there are a lot of factors that don't add up with the terrible things that happen to these people. It's always, no, she would never miss work. Oh, she was always punctual. No, they would never just go somewhere and not tell us where they were going. Very rarely, like maybe in Simone Reidinger's case, do you have like a free-spirited person that would just up and leave somewhere.
Yeah.
So with something like this where it's totally unlike them, it's strange to not have any follow-up from an employer.
So not only was she out of work for multiple days, she had also had a vacation planned, like literally the next week for the first week in July, to go up to Maine to visit her family. That's just another reason to say, like, she wouldn't have just run away. She had a job, she had a house, she had a vacation planned, like she wouldn't just leave.
Yeah, that makes sense. It just doesn't seem like her running away would add up.
Right off the bat, because of these things, authorities deemed there to be foul play involved in Lyla's disappearance. So as the investigation ramped up, authorities didn't waste any time, and they called in the Rhode Island State Police and their canine unit to check the surrounding area of Lyla's home. And just based on a map and the location surrounding it, it seemed to be pretty wooded. But even after the canine team had come in, they were unable to find any sign of Lyla around her property or nearby. Over the coming weeks, massive searches took place after she disappeared, but still, no one found anything. That is, until July 13th, 1977, just over 2 weeks after Lyla had gone missing. Even with all of these extensive searches taking place, it's a Department of Transportation, or DOT worker, that stumbled upon Lyla's remains. Sometime during the day on July 13th, 1977, this DOT worker was cutting grass near the intersection of William S. Canning Boulevard and Stafford Road when he smelled the scent of decomposition. Upon further inspection of the area, he found Lyla's body. And this DOT worker actually spoke to the press. And there are some clips that I found in some recent WPRI news updates on this case that included some of the footage from the news back in 1977. There were comments from detectives working the case, as well as this DOT worker that found her. So I want to play the clip from this guy for you now.
Picking up litter, coming down over here to where it was, and I smelled something. I thought it was a dog or something. I was going to put it in a truck or throw it back in the woods farther. I looked and I saw the body there.
So what do you think about that guy?
He's definitely from Rhode Island.
You got that right with the accent.
Some litter.
Some litter.
Thought it was a dog or something.
That's perfect. But I think it's interesting because, I don't know, just to see clips from back then and to like see them talking to the news and his explanation of everything. I feel like a lot of times now in investigations, it's so hush-hush and quiet and people don't want to talk to the press about certain things. And he's just right out there like telling them exactly what happened. And
the news is weird now. So a little side note. When I cut the grass, I always listen to Bandrew Says podcast.
Okay.
So podcastages, like just rambling podcast.
Okay.
And his most recent one was about how he loves the 90s. And he has like been living his life like he's in the 90s. Like he bought all this stuff. He bought a Velcro wallet. He's been reading Goosebumps books, like all stuff like that. And he said one of the biggest downfalls or one of the most negative things about nowadays versus back in the 90s has to do with news. And it has to do with now you have 24-hour news coverage and it's all bad. It's all doom and gloom. It's like you're constantly struck by bad news all day long.
Yeah.
Whereas back in the day, it was 1 hour of news at night. And I think people were much more interested in getting information direct from a source like this.
Yeah.
Because when you put it out on the news, you only have 1 hour, one day to really get this interesting clip out there.
I bet people who were either following this case had known about it because she had been missing for 2 weeks at that point. So I bet people who were interested and wanted to know what had happened were checking the nightly news every night. Like, what's going on? What's going on? Is there more? Is there more?
Right.
So then to see like, oh my God, this happened. This guy found her and he's right there and he's telling what happened. Like, you're getting that firsthand knowledge that today you're just so used to.
Yeah. One other weird thing, I don't know why, but when I watch the clip, I think of Jaws.
I I've never seen Jaws. So.
I just think of like the press releases that they've had where like after one of the shark attacks happened, they would have all the press there and they would be recording it. I get a weird flashback of like watching Jaws when I watch
That's
this
funny.
clip.
I feel like, so now everybody that's listening knows that I've never seen Shawshank Redemption and I've never seen Jaws. So I just feel like this is going to turn into every episode a new movie that Brittany hasn't seen that she now needs to watch.
Right. But just to get back to what he said,
yeah,
he was off the side of the road.
Yes.
Picking up litter. So it's not like this body was well hidden. It wasn't dug and put into a grave. It sounds like her remains were thrown off to the side of either a roadway or something.
Yes, exactly. And that's what we're about to get into. So it's been reported that Lyla's remains were very badly decomposed, as she'd likely been out in the elements during the hot weather in the end of June and July for several weeks. Her body was found approximately 40 feet into the woods under, quote, thick underbrush. At first, it was unclear if Lyla had been sexually assaulted or really what the state of her body was when she was found, other than the fact that her body was badly decomposed. Later on, though, it's confirmed that Lyla had been found fully clothed and was wearing what she had been last seen in, which has been described as a red short-sleeved top with a pair of blue jeans. The medical examiner at the time, Dr. William Sterner, was able to determine her cause of death. He stated that she'd been shot in the right side of her head with a .22 caliber gun. After a little bit of time, it was later released and confirmed by authorities that Lyla had not been sexually assaulted or beaten. It seems as though the only wound was the gunshot wound to her head. At least that's all that's been released. It was also discovered that in one of Lyla's pockets was that spare set of keys that had been missing from her home.
Oh, they were missing from the home. I thought they were in the home.
So her main set of keys was in the house.
But the other ones were gone.
But the other ones were gone.
That makes you think that she would have probably gone for a ride with somebody, because if she wasn't taking her car keys or her main set, she would have been grabbing the other set.
Yep, and the door was locked.
But why would she leave everything on in the house?
And why would she leave her purse, her glasses, her contacts, like all the things that she would need if she were going somewhere? Was this just a quick go pick up something? I mean, I've been trying to like rack my brain, like why would she have just left and only brought that one spare set of keys? Essentially, I would think to just lock the door behind her.
I don't know. I would guess maybe like, sure, her current boyfriend left at midnight, but did they leave to go somewhere together to like go pick something up, or?
I don't know. They seem pretty dead set on saying that he left, and I believe she stayed home, and I don't know if maybe there was like a sighting from a neighbor seeing him, like only he left the house.
Was there some type of establishment or something that was open that she could have been walking to?
No. So do you want to look at the map that I sent you?
Sure.
Because on there you can see like kind of what's around her house and I guess kind of what's really not around her house, because it was pretty, I guess you would say, secluded.
So the closest thing it looks like is what, Sanford & Son used auto parts store?
So it's kind of like a dead end almost.
Yep.
Kind of looks like it's a dead end, and like,
I think it's just the trees.
Yeah, I guess it's just weird that used auto parts store, it's like...
Oh, maybe not, because the road on Google Maps actually stops.
But then how do you get to this Sanford & Sons place? Is it like a...
private driveway, probably?
Oh, true. Maybe it's like it looks like it's a junkyard, though.
Yeah, it doesn't look like an auto parts store. It looks like a junkyard that they would sell parts out of old cars.
Yeah.
Not like an AutoZone.
Yes.
Like you go to the junkyard to pick up parts for a car, like you take them like a pick and pay type thing.
Like you bring your own tools and you remove what you need from whatever car matches your car in the junkyard.
Right, and then they sell it to you there.
Yeah, exactly. So to answer your question, no, I don't think that she would have walked anywhere. It doesn't seem like there's anything close by that she would consider walking to.
Yeah, like you said earlier, it's densely wooded.
Okay, so now let's get into authorities' investigation at this point. From the very beginning, the case was taken seriously, and now with all this information becoming public, people certainly had questions and likely wanted to know what authorities had done so far in terms of trying to find Lyla's killer. And I want to play another clip for you from that WPRI video. This time, it's from a detective working the case and his comments thus far into their investigation.
She definitely died of a gunshot wound to the head, and it is definitely considered a homicide.
Do you have any suspects? How's your investigation going?
I don't really know about suspects. We are talking with people we have talked with before. Our investigation is continuing around the clock. We are working together with the Rhode Island State Police, and we have teams out following every lead that we do receive.
So he did release some interesting information. He said that she was definitely shot in the head.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely looking at it as a homicide.
Mm-hmm. A homicide.
A homicide. Yeah. But the rest of it's really nothing. It's just, yes, we're following up on every lead possible. We're talking to people that we already talked to before.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Again, I just think it's one of those things where it's like cool to be transported back to 1977. You hear about all these cases. We talk about so many that are older on this show. And I feel like you never really have like those original news clips. Like, of course, I can look through and I have original newspapers from newspapers.com and I can kind of read what they're saying. But when you actually have that video footage of somebody from 40 plus years ago talking to the news, and I feel like you're just transported back to say like, oh, those are the people working this investigation. Like you have like a picture in your mind of them, but now you can actually see one firsthand, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely cool to be able to see that original footage. And it kind of helps you picture the type of area that it was, the type of people that they would be dealing with, to put a face and a voice to the name of who was working the investigation.
Exactly. So as the detective mentioned in that video clip, they didn't have anything in terms of a suspect just yet, but were actively working the case. The Tiverton PD, Rhode Island State Police, and the FBI were all involved pretty much from the start of the investigation, and I believe the state police and the FBI had gotten more involved after Lyla's body was found. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, foul play was suspected from the very beginning, and that's exactly what authorities were working with now that they knew Lyla had been murdered. As soon as her case was publicized, leads had been pouring in, and there were a few of note. The first being that a neighbor had called in and allegedly stated that they'd heard screams coming from Lyla's home around 3 o'clock in the morning on the 27th. Well, technically the 28th. It's unclear if this tip came in after her body was found or before, but at first glance, it seems like something that police can certainly look into and maybe help to further the investigation.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also important for the timeline because those screams would have been heard 3 hours after the current boyfriend would have supposedly left the house.
Yes, but if I'm honest, I kind of feel like this could potentially be a red herring, and maybe someone like kind of wanted to hear something, or maybe they heard something and misconstrued it and it might not mean anything at all, because I just keep going back to the fact that she took her keys with her and she locked the door behind her. So if she's in distress or if somebody's trying to take her out of the house forcibly, which doesn't seem like they did because there was no sign of a struggle, why would she have been screaming?
Yeah, I don't understand that either. So from what we've gathered so far, it seems as though she left the house purposefully. But I'm also torn on that because she left stuff on in the house. She left the TV on. Unless she left the TV on regularly for her animals.
Maybe.
It's just strange that it appears as though she locked the door behind her, but left all this stuff on. Where would she be going?
Had to have been quick.
Had to have been quick.
Now, I do want to backtrack just a little bit before we move on and discuss a couple interesting things regarding where Lyla's body was found. So, first of all, her house was located right off of Route 81, which is Stafford Road. And if you remember, her remains were found near the intersection of William S. Canning Boulevard and Stafford Road. So, when looking at a map, you can see that it was a straight shot up from her home on Cynthia Ave, which was just over 3 miles south of where her body was later located. Along with that, the scene where her body was found was literally right on the Rhode Island-Massachusetts state line and was only a couple hundred yards south of Fall River, which, if you remember, is where Lyla worked. Not only that, but the site was also right next to a construction zone for a casino being built in Tiverton, Rhode Island, which now appears to be known as Bally's Tiverton. And I do have a copy of a map on our socials that shows the distance between Lyla's house and where her body was found, along with the construction site, which is now labeled on current maps as Bally's Tiverton. There's also one other thing I wanted to mention, and that's the location of Lyla's home. We kind of talked about this a little bit before, but it appears to be on a dead-end street, and there aren't too many neighbors around. We know that Claudette had noticed that Lyla hadn't been home, and it was she and her husband who alerted authorities of the strange circumstances, which then ignited the investigation into her disappearance. I don't know if it was Claudette that reported screams, but I haven't seen anything stating as such. So then that really only leaves a handful of other neighbors on the street that might have heard something. The houses aren't completely right up on each other, though, so I'm just not sure how much I believe the whole scream thing.
Yeah, I doubt it was Claudette that reported that there were screams because she had her husband go look at Lyla's house because of the car and the light.
Yeah, 2 days later, too. So if she had heard something, she would have been like, oh my God, husband, go over there now at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know?
Right. I'm thinking more, again, 70s, almost the 80s. people talk, people want to be,
Involved.
oh, I'm involved. Yes, exactly. So Claudette was probably like, oh my God, I sent Henry over to check and we are the ones that started all this. And then somebody else was probably like, oh yeah, well, I heard screams that night type thing. So people wanted to be involved. People wanted to help, something to talk about.
Exactly. And authorities have never said like that they've discredited this tip. I'm just saying, in my opinion, I just think it's something that's not necessarily not believable, but, might just be a little bit more than what it seems it could be.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And before we move on, I do also want to mention that on Zillow, there are actually interior and exterior pictures of 70 Cynthia Ave. So you can see what it looked like, the size, the whole outdoor area of the property itself, and all that. And I feel like in a lot of cases, you don't really get a full grasp on what the person's house looked like. But in this case, there are actually photos available online if you wanted to take a look.
Are they current photos, though?
Yes. So it does look as though the property was upgraded, I guess you could say. But I would think that it was probably upgraded in like the 90s because it's that like yellowy orange cabinets, like that kind of thing. But to get kind of an idea of what the house looked like, what the front porch was like, how far her driveway was from the front door, those kinds of things. I think it's kind of cool to be able to kind of put a visual to that when you're talking about the story and a bunch of stuff happened at the house and police were there, they were checking that area. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. I wonder if you feel the same way I feel about this house.
I mean, the house is what the house is. But what I'm laughing at is on the Zillow pictures, somebody has like an overhead view and they have their finger in the picture pointing at the house.
Oh my God. I know.
It's that one.
It's that one right there. But it's funny because you think too, for example, before I found this, when I was searching for her address, I have this vision in my head of what the house would look like. And then I had seen a couple news photos and I could see just like the very front of the house with the porch, because the porch and the porch light seemed like such a big thing. And then when I looked at it, like her driveway, so I'm thinking, okay, her car's still in the driveway. I'm thinking of just like
a straight
driveway, not a curved one. So that one threw me and I was like, oh, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's great to have the visuals. And I think we've talked about this. I made mention of it before. Like when you first read the Harry Potter books before the movies were out, you had a vision of how everybody looked.
Yeah.
But now once you've seen the movies, if you go back and you read the books, you picture those people as how they were portrayed in the movies. So now you have a visual of this house. So when you're picturing it, you're going to think of it that way. But then as we go and we cover future cases, you may now reference back to a house similar to this as this house and like, oh, I remember her house type thing, and kind of use that to
compare,
build reference.
Now, moving on, authorities had also mentioned that they'd conducted over 100 interviews in the 2 weeks prior to when Lyla's body had been found, and then many more interviews would be completed after the discovery of her body.
So I'm guessing that detective that was on that news clip?
Yep.
That's probably what he was referring to. He said he talked to people again.
Yeah, so he probably interviewed neighbors. He probably talked to her friends. I would assume he talked to people at work. And now that he knows she's been killed, what did he miss? What does he need to go and ask now?
Right. And now he's matching up how the conversations may differ, because when he talked to those people before, it was like, oh, where is she? But now you're going to go talk to those people again, knowing that she's murdered.
Yep.
See how their story might change, see how their demeanor might change, and try to connect the dots that way.
Yes. So from the very start, the number one person who people might believe could have been involved, her boyfriend, was entirely ruled out as a suspect. He was never considered one, hasn't been ever at any point in this investigation, and is still not considered a suspect.
Right. I mean, we talked about this last week. You always start with like the husband or the significant other. In this aspect, I would say if you had to look at people, it would be the current boyfriend and the ex-husband.
That's the exact thing that I was going to mention next. Was I would think the number one person you would look at would be the ex-husband. But, like I said before, it's not clear if their divorce was amicable or contentious. We don't know any of those things. But if there were issues, if it was potentially drama-filled, what kind of things would you look into with him? Would you consider that maybe he was jealous of this new lover in her life? Authorities have said the boyfriend's ruled out. He's not a suspect, never was. I have never heard or read or seen one mention of the ex-husband. Why isn't he talked about?
Especially being ruled out. So if they're going to go through and they're going to say that the current boyfriend is ruled out, why wouldn't you do the same for the ex-husband?
Yes, that's my question.
Yeah, so remember earlier when I said, oh, those spare keys could have been her ex-husband's? I misheard you. I thought that the spare keys were still there. So I thought her main set of keys were there and her spare set were there.
Okay, yep.
So did she have two sets? Or did her ex-husband still have that spare set?
Mm-hmm.
And now they're just like planted on her body or something.
But why would they be so hard up on saying they knew that all of these things were left in the house and the only thing that was missing from the house were the spare set of keys? You would assume that they were her spare set.
Unless that information came out after they found the spare set on her body?
Maybe, yeah. Because a lot of that stuff is all in like newer articles. Yeah.
So they may be saying that because they're in the know that those spare set were found with her.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So authorities have stated that there were persons of interest identified at some point, but there was never enough to actually be able to charge whoever it is that they had on their radar. And unfortunately, no, whoever it was, their names were not released publicly.
Just going to throw out another possible suspect that absolutely has nothing to do with the story that you've said so far.
Okay.
But knowing that junkyard or auto parts store was down the street made me think of Stephen Avery.
Oh my God, you're so right. That's true.
Like, who's running that thing right down the street from her?
Yeah.
Because if you think, she wasn't in the passenger seat when she was shot. She was shot in the right side of her head. So if she was driving a car, whose car was it? Because her car was at the house still. Car keys were still at the house.
Let's get into this in a minute.
Okay.
As time went on, Lyla's case went cold relatively early on in the investigation, as there wasn't much to go off of. Even though those tips and leads were coming in and they potentially had persons of interest, none of them ever panned out. But even though the case had gone cold, current investigators wouldn't let it go unnoticed that the original detectives who worked the case did all they could to find answers. A passage in the Herald News stated, quote, "The case was worked extensively. We had the Tiverton police, the state police, and the FBI involved. When you read the case file, it is clear they wanted to close the case. They wanted to find the person responsible," end quote.
Right. When you have all of these agencies, let alone Tiverton Police, which is a smaller department compared to some cities, but then you have state police and you have the FBI.
Yeah.
Like, you have some big agencies working this case. So it's not like they're going to not supply resources if they have enough information to go somewhere with it.
Oh, for sure. So that now kind of brings us into theories and what might have taken place on June 27th, 1977, and authorities have actually put out some information in terms of a theory that they're working off of. The number one thing that seems to be wholeheartedly believed, especially since the boyfriend had been ruled out, is that whatever took place that night happened after Lyla's boyfriend had left, which was around midnight. The current detective, Michael Miguel, told WPRI, quote, "We believe she left the house with someone she knew. She took the time to lock the door. We believe she expected to return shortly after with the lights still on and TV running," end quote. The other belief that's been stated by detectives working Lyla's case is that she was brought somewhere else, which it's entirely unclear where this somewhere else might have been, then shot in the head, and then dumped in the woods. It's also been stated that she may have been dragged from a car into that thick underbrush in the woods off the side of the road along Route 81.
So she could have been killed in the car and then dragged? Or she was dragged kicking and screaming to where she was shot?
Maybe, yes. So I wanted to break it down a little bit, like kind of by each piece. So if she was believed to have been brought somewhere else, I think that makes sense. There was no sign of a struggle in the house. She probably was not killed in her house or near her house. I would also assume that neighbors might have heard a gunshot if they're thinking they're hearing screams if she had been killed, right?
Right. Whoever came to her house to ask her to leave or to bring her somewhere could have done so with a sense of urgency to say, oh, hey, I need your help, or I need you to come with me, or we have to go do something right away.
Yeah.
Which is why she left the TV and the lights on inside.
Because it was just quick. Let me grab my spare set of keys and let's go do this really quick.
Right.
Yeah. So I do think it's possible that she could have been killed in the same spot where her body was found. Now, regarding the shot to her head, she was shot in the right side, which means she likely wasn't killed in a car unless she was driving it. But I don't think that really makes sense either. Why would someone come to her house, say, oh, you need to help me with something, and then say, oh, you drive my car?
Unless it was multiple people and she was in the rear driver's side
Yes.
seat.
Yes, that's exactly the next point I was going to make. So you have to think that she's likely driven to this location, taken out of the car, and killed there.
But who would she get into a car with post-midnight, and for what reason?
That I can't figure out. And the other thing is the fact that authorities are saying she might have been dragged from a car. So was she brought to one location, shot there, put back in the car, then driven to the location where her body was found, then dragged out?
Or was she taken to a spot, killed, then the vehicle was driven to some type of area and the body was dumped out while they were driving to their next destination or via their escape route.
I mean, I guess, maybe, but...
I mean, you got to think Tiverton is kind of like a little island area. There's probably not a lot of ways in or out. And it looked like in the map that you had provided, there's that like more cartoony looking one.
Yeah, yep.
Home of victim, then you go north on Stafford Road. It looks like if you continue north up there, you're probably going to exit the islandish
area of
Tiverton.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder what information the police have to state that she was brought somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Where would she have been brought to? Which brings me back to that auto body place.
But why would you go like further down in the opposite direction of where she's then dumped later? That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, and I think we need to know more about her social connections, friends, acquaintances, because she only would have gotten out of the house and gotten into somebody's car with somebody that she knew.
Yeah.
So there has to be some type of connection there.
I just can't even imagine, though. I'm just thinking, like, randomly, I guess, like, say Christine just came to the house at, like, 2 o'clock in the morning, and she was like, I need you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure I would get out and I would help her, but I can't imagine, like, what she would come over and be like, I need you to come with me at 2 o'clock in the morning to help me with this.
Right.
That I would be like, yeah, sure, let's go.
Well, she was an animal lover. That's something that people put out publicly, or maybe the news put out publicly.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe somebody was like, oh my God, somebody just hit a dog or whatever. I don't know.
Ooh.
Maybe some weird connection there, like to tug on our heartstrings type thing to say, oh my God, I need your help.
Yeah, be like, oh my God, I was just driving down the street and I knew you lived over here and I just hit a dog and I need your help. Can you come help me? I mean, I wouldn't do it, but...
It could be somebody... I mean, she could have locked the door just because it's the middle of the night, not because she was going somewhere. Even if she was running out to the front of her house, maybe she wanted to lock the door or something. I don't know, something to get her out of the house, because once she's out of the house, you can throw her into the car, especially if it's multiple people.
Yeah.
It's strange. We need to know more about her connections and, like, who the hell would she get into the car with, after midnight?
I don't know. And that's the unfortunate thing is, like, this is literally all we've got.
Yeah.
And this is one of those cases where there's not a lot of information to go on, but...
Is there anything that her family came forward to talk about?
No.
So there's nothing from her family?
No. And the thing that's crazy is usually in these older cases, and ones, even if they weren't like crazy heavily publicized, you can still find a handful of articles in older newspapers. There were 2.
And most of the stuff came from new articles.
Yes. So it's like a lot of times, Lisa McBride, for example, that was 1990, obviously like 13 years later, but you still had quotes from her family. You had articles, you had reporters doing full-on interviews, and you got a lot more information that way. With this, it was literally, her body was found, this is what happened, this is what the medical examiner said, and that's it.
Yeah. So
any information at all came up in recent years.
It's very strange. It's like, I talk about how when we speculate, it needs to be in the realm. Yes, rooted in fact, or not just something that could have possibly happened, but something that most likely happened. But with something here, you're left with very little to go on. Things that I'm thinking about are, sure, they ruled out the current boyfriend, but what if the current boyfriend was actually married and he was having an affair, and his wife found out about the affair and forced him to go back to the house, lured her out, and then both of them took her somewhere and killed her. Stuff like that. Like, there has to be a connection with somebody that she would be willing to get out of the house for and lock the door. So, current boyfriend, ex-husband, family member,
best friend. Yep. But
so,
then I think, too, like, maybe this is totally out of the realm of possibility, but I just go back to using a .22 caliber weapon. It's small. Was it a woman? Like, I know that's just, like, such a basic thing to think, but when you have, like, literally nothing to go on, what could that mean? You have to look at, like, all those little pieces to say, is this important?
Right. It's not to say that a man can't have a .22 caliber pistol or rifle.
Of course not, because you look at John William Leonard Sr.,
right,
and we know that was a man, and they've put out a sketch of the suspect now, and he used a .22 caliber weapon, but maybe it's just for discreetness, I guess, to have like a really small gun. But I just think as a woman, you carry a purse, you'd want to fit something small in it. So it's not, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility to think.
No, and that could go back to, maybe her current boyfriend was having an affair and he was married, and it was the wife's pistol or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you have such little that's put out there and it's a case that hasn't been solved in a long time and they haven't put out a lot of information as far as, who the actual suspects are,
Yeah.
can you really trust that they've ruled out somebody? You want to, but until they actually have a suspect and they have enough evidence to say it was most likely this person or we're looking at this person more heavily than another, can you really trust that that other person should be ruled out? Because how?
Well, it's like we talked about last week with Diane Wolf, and you were, kind of hard up on Merle. Authorities are saying, no, he's been ruled out, but
all the evidence
you don't
is
know.
Kind of attached to him, like he's the most likely of everyone. So what are you using to rule him out?
Yes. So then you just question those things, and it's harder. It's definitely harder with these older cases where you might not have reporters with their boots on the ground, trying to get to, say they're a reporter in Chicago, and they're like, oh my God, there's this big story in Rhode Island. I'm going to go there. But then it's like, that didn't really happen. Clearly, we had no articles. So it's like, you've got nothing from back then. You have no one talking to the boyfriend. You have no one talking to the ex-husband. You have no one talking to coworkers. You have nothing.
From a journalistic perspective.
Exactly. So then you have to go off of what you're getting now. And of course, authorities aren't going to give you everything they've got. They're probably keeping certain things close to them because, and I will say, I was going to say it in like 5 minutes, but I'm going to say it now. They have a person of interest. And they're not saying who it is. And
if they have ruled out the current boyfriend, is it the ex-husband?
Is it? And what does that mean?
Yeah.
And I tried to look him up too. Like, I even had like his middle initial, everything, like looking up in Middletown, different areas in Rhode Island, trying to find anything on newspapers.com, trying to find anything on land records, like all this stuff. And the only thing I could find with this guy was that public record search for the house. So I've got nothing on him. I don't even know anything about him. I don't even know if he's still alive. I couldn't find an obituary.
Yeah.
But you just have to think, who's this person of interest that they have? What do they have on him or her? And they are most likely giving these little pieces of information with the thought in mind that we're close. We're really close. We don't want to give too much.
And we just want to give a little bit that to most people seems insignificant, but anybody that's actually in the know might be able to take that little bit of information that we're giving and help us form the rest that we need.
Yes.
To go forward with charges or at least turning a person of interest into a suspect.
When I was looking on Reddit, I always check Reddit and web sleuths, and I know it's always difficult to confirm if someone is actually connected to a case that way, if they're like a verified user, or if they actually knew the person, or if they were from the area. Those things, of course, you see people lie online all the time. But with this case, unfortunately, there's not a lot. People don't really talk about this case. And there was one Reddit thread that I could find, and someone gave a really good rundown on the case, and there were only like 6 or 7 comments. And one of the comments was from someone who said that I think he or she had worked at Aetna back in the day with her. And they said like really soon after, authorities came in and just removed everything from her desk and never saw anything or heard anything about it again.
Probably for investigative purposes.
Yeah, probably. But I think like people look at that and then they say like, ooh, that's kind of weird. Or it's like,
was it somebody at work type thing?
Yeah. Then that made me think like, oh, I wonder if like they came in and they just took all her stuff and they wanted to make sure they had every little piece so they could see who she had connections with. I mean, also, maybe this isn't totally out of the realm of possibility, but like, could she have upset somebody with life insurance? Could she have like denied a claim or something and someone was pissed off? I mean, I highly doubt she would have left the house willingly to go see them.
That's my whole thing that I keep coming back to is like whoever she left the house with, she had to have a reason to leave the house after midnight.
Yeah.
To randomly go somewhere.
It's just weird.
It's very weird. And I think that when investigators gathered all of her stuff from work, it was strictly because they want all of her personal belongings to see if there is anything, any type of connection that they can link with something else or any communications, letters,
Did you
phone
write down
numbers.
a sticky note, like something on a sticky note to put?
To see what she had been working on. Maybe it could have been linked to somebody that she denied a claim for, something like that. But the root of everything for me comes back to however she ended up leaving the house. It had to be with a sense of urgency because she had left the TV and the lights on inside. Had to be somebody that she knew or somebody that knew enough about her to know that they could say something to convince her to leave the house.
Yeah.
Which could be as simple as, oh, she's an animal lover. I just hit a dog out here. I really need some help.
Yeah.
But would she lock the door behind her? Who knows?
I mean, someone could have even run down the street and been like, come with me, and their car could have been further down the street where there were no houses.
And we might be thinking of something totally off, like, did she lock the house?
Mm-hmm.
It could have been the type of door where the inside always stays locked. Like, you can open the door inside, and you just need to close the door, and it's always locked.
Yeah. But if you were to leave without doing that, you would need your key to get in. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, maybe she didn't lock the door behind her. Maybe she just shut the door. So it's not like she had to take the time to do that, or it could have already been locked, where she just opened the door and then shut it behind her, and it locked. And maybe the spare set of keys that ended up on her could have been with somebody else, or there's a lot of different ways that you can go with this.
Yeah.
But again, not to harp on it over and over, she had to know the person, or the person had to know enough about her in order to lure her out of the house in the middle of the night after her boyfriend had just left.
So to go back to the screams that were heard in that tip, and if that's been validated or not, or if it really holds any validity, I think about the fact that she was found in what she was last seen wearing. So if her boyfriend left at midnight and she had work the next morning, you would assume that within the next half hour to an hour, she was working on like her nighttime routine. You're probably going to get in your pajamas or take a shower, wash your hair, wash your face, whatever. So if she's found in what she was last seen wearing, which was, in my opinion, daytime clothes, if she's wearing jeans, she's not going to be going to bed in jeans.
Right.
I would think if the boyfriend left at midnight, whoever came to get her had to have come relatively soon after he left, because she probably would have already gotten in pajamas and gotten ready for bed by that point, unless they were like, oh, quick, help me. And she's like, oh, sure, it's urgent, I'm going to change. Probably not.
Right.
I would think that it would be probably between midnight and 1 a.m. So those screams at 3 a.m., again, it's just another reason and another layer to add to it for me why I don't think that is a valid tip.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that those screams definitely came from her house. If it was a neighbor down the street and she heard screams at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's not a lot of infrastructure around here. It's just woods. You could potentially hear somebody screaming from who knows how far away.
I want to know if she's the type of person that would change into comfy clothes right after she got home, or if she would stay in her daytime clothes all the time. Because I think that just means something. Like, why would you... Like, obviously, if you're with your boyfriend, it's a new relationship. You're probably not going to be like, oh, I'm going to get in my comfies or whatever. Like, you want to look good around your new significant other. So I could see her being in her jeans and whatever until he left. But I think it's just making me continue to think, like, whatever happened had to have happened probably right after he left. I don't think that anything happening at 3 a.m., like, if that were the case, that's still, like, 2 to 3 hours later.
Yeah, what time is she going to bed? She's probably got to work at 8 or 9 in the morning.
Yeah, she's not going to go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. So if anything happened, and if she's going to be getting ready for bed at sometime soon, she would have changed out of her clothes.
You would assume so, yes.
Yeah, and I don't think that if someone came to her house to get her to leave with them, she's going to be like, oh, hold on 5 minutes, I'm going to go get changed.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about the sense of urgency. That is probably something that would have gotten her out of the house quickly. She's not going to say, I'm going to go change. There's a dead dog down the street that you just hit. I'm going to go change into my clothes, and then I'm going to come with you.
Or maybe she slept in, like, underwear and the red T-shirt that she was wearing. And when somebody came to the door, she just threw those pants on.
I mean, maybe. I wouldn't do that, but I can't.
I know, but
I can't
you never
knock
know.
somebody else. So.
Right.
I don't know. I still think at the end of the day, my biggest thing is that I think it happened probably within an hour after the boyfriend left. I wonder if they were watching.
Potentially.
To know that he left and she was now alone.
This goes back to my total out there idea of her boyfriend was married, having an affair type thing, but you think that they would really rule him out?
If he had that kind of
If that was like the type of thing where, oh, he was having an affair, he was actually married type thing, do you think they would actually rule it out that fast? Or
probably not.
Probably not, because then there's a connection where it's like, oh, you were having an affair.
Mm-hmm. Or what if the divorce was contentious and the ex-husband had met a new woman and she was like, get the fuck rid of her. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Like, what if they were going through some sort of battle?
I don't know. I doubt it, because they didn't have kids. They really had no connections. They were only married for 2 years.
Yeah, and he deeded the house over to her. I'm just annoyed because
the more we
feel
talk about
like,
it, the less you really know where you're going to settle on it.
Yeah, I feel like I have absolutely no idea here what happened.
I want to know what our listeners think.
I want to know what you guys think too.
This is one where, like, usually by the end of it, we can come to a general idea of what we think might have happened.
Mm-hmm.
This one, it's like the more you talk about it, the more you're like,
that doesn't
I have no
seem
idea what happened.
At all.
Right. All we can really go back to is the fact, again, if she's leaving after midnight, who is it that she would leave the house for?
Mm-hmm.
Was it somebody that she knew? Was it somebody that had a way to lure her out of the house?
Mm-hmm.
And then where would she have been brought to at that time?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like there's anything open at this time in the area. So it's not like, she was brought to a restaurant, or would she have gone to a bar? Maybe a bar would be open after midnight.
But
so maybe her boyfriend.
Monday?
Hey, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, where would she have left to go to?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know. And I like your idea. Not that I like the idea, but I think your idea holds merit that this would be something that they would like quick come to the door, knock on the door furiously, like, oh my God, I have an urgent scenario. I need you.
Right.
And she'd be like, oh, let me grab my keys. Okay, I'm coming. And then she would just jump right out really quick. Like that to me seems like honestly the only reason, because also if it's this urgent thing and you're freaking out, like you're not thinking in that moment, like I could be in
Protect
danger
yourself.
or whatever. It's quick, get out, help, rather than hold on, let me just take a minute and think about me and myself and my safety. It's 1:00 in the morning. I don't really know this person. This is kind of strange. But like you said, pulling on those heartstrings, asking her something or telling her something that would upset her, that would get her out of the house quickly. Like I can't see of any plans that anyone would ever have at 1:00 in the morning to say, yeah, let's just hop out of the house real quick and go run down the street and do this and I'll come back.
Right.
Why wouldn't she just get in her own car and do that?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me.
The only other piece of information I guess you would want to try and connect to is where the body was left. It was left in a northbound direction from her house.
Yep.
Fall River is north of her house. So is there the possibility that whoever did this was from the Fall River area, which could again link to something at work, something of that nature? It is something to remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it was left on a northbound direction, and she did have connections to the Fall River area, which is north. So, and where her body was left on the side of the road was on the main drag to leave the area.
Yeah.
It wasn't like in a neighborhood, or it wasn't like, off the side of the road in a off the beaten path area. It was off a main drag that would lead you out of the Tiverton area towards Fall River, New Bedford.
Well, yeah, it's literally right on the same street that her house is off of. So they take a left out of her street, they go up north, they drop her body off literally on the same road. I mean, it's Stafford Road. It's Stafford Road connecting to William S. Canning Boulevard. It's a straight shot. So if they did whatever they did, they wanted to get out of the area, boom, done, they're out.
Right.
And they don't necessarily have to know the area to do that either.
Right, and it's right near the on and off ramps. At least nowadays, I don't know what the highway routing was like back then, but it's right near 24, and 24 is the main highway that brings you a lot of different places out of Tiverton. So it looks like whoever was doing this, if I had to guess, probably came from a northern direction, did whatever they did, and then was leaving back in a northern direction.
That's exactly what I would think too.
Yeah. So questions I think that we're left with are, in order to rule more things out.
Yeah.
Where was the current boyfriend from?
Yep.
Where was the ex-husband living? Who was she friendly or unfriendly with from the Fall River, New Bedford, Massachusetts area? And why hasn't the family come forward to say anything about it, at least in all of the articles that you've been able to find?
I believe her parents have passed away.
But she had 3 siblings, right?
Yes, but you have to remember, like, back then, they also weren't from the area. They lived in Maine, and she was in Rhode Island. So, I mean, sure, it's obviously still in the Northeast, but again, I think it goes back to that, like, boots on the ground journalism that we were talking about. Are they going to go travel up to Maine to talk to the family? Were they struggling with what had happened, and did they not want to talk to reporters? I think that's hard, and I don't know if they're still alive today, but I know her parents have passed away.
And we don't know what the dynamic was like with her siblings to begin with. Not to say that they wouldn't care, but like you said, would somebody go up and track them down and ask them the questions and things like that? But you would assume that somebody would probably try and reach out and contact them, even if it's by phone, and say, hey, what's going on? Like, do you have any idea on who could have killed your sister?
Yeah, but maybe they just said no comment. They didn't want to talk. And I think that certainly happens. And there are a lot of cases, actually. Specifically, I think of Tammy Belanger, because when I first started researching that case, the family just fully refused to speak to reporters. They were, I assume, too heartbroken to talk to anybody. There was one particular journalist who was able to talk to them at one point in the very beginning. And like, there were a bunch of articles talking about how this was like such a feat for that guy, and how, he was the only one to ever get any sort of comment from them. And then, Years later, they ended up talking to the press, but by this time now, who knows with this case?
Yeah, that's true. And family members could also say like, oh, I don't want it to turn into a spectacle where everybody's showing up here, talking to us, asking us about this.
Yeah, I think we're different. If it were us and if it were our family member, we would want to get everything out there that we possibly could, but that's just not the case for everybody.
Yeah, and people can also misconstrue stuff. Like, say you come out with a public statement saying, oh, we want to figure out what happened to our sister, this, that, and the other thing, or say it was a closer relative. I want to know what happened to my wife. I want to know what happened to my
child. Yeah.
My child. People are always going to be nasty, and they're going to try and be like, oh, based on the way they spoke, I think they're involved. I think they're the ones that did it. Type shit like that.
Well, do you remember in Jack and Geraldine McGee when we talked about how people, of course, all over the internet are like, I bet the son had something to do with it. He was going to get the company and like all this stuff.
Right.
And all he's doing is saying, hey, help me find out who killed my parents.
Right. That's the thing. Like, if you stayed totally removed from news outlets and from public statements and stuff like that, there's no ammunition for people to misconstrue and to form their own type of narrative and try to craft a story.
Exactly. So I totally don't fault the family for this at all. After decades of the case being cold, what seemed to really heat up the investigation into who killed Lyla Poitras was the cold case cards being created in Rhode Island. Lyla's case was put on the cards as the ace of spades after Sue Cormier, the detective who'd been working to spearhead getting the cards done in Rhode Island, contacted the Tiverton police chief at the time, Patrick Jones. He told the Herald News, quote, when Detective Cormier reached out, I thought immediately of the Poitras case. It has been 40-something years, but it isn't forgotten, end quote. The article goes on to state, quote, Detective Cormier sent me a JPEG of the Poitras card. I put it on our Facebook page. Once I put it out there, it really took off. We got a lot of calls. People are interested in this, end quote.
I can, of course, see why people would be interested in it. It's a case that is almost like shrouded in mystique.
Yeah.
It's like, you really want to know who could have convinced this lady to leave her house in the middle of the night. She wasn't like, you know, a devious person that was into drugs and that was into crime and stuff like that. So who would have it out for her?
Yeah, she's a normal lady living a normal life. Sure, she had a divorce. How many people in this world get divorced? She owned her own home. She had a good job. She loved animals. She seemed to get along with everyone. I mean, she seems like a completely and totally normal person. Why would someone want to kill her?
And something that we haven't distinctly like put a pin in is that she was shot in the head.
Yeah.
She was not sexually assaulted. She wasn't beaten. So this was like a quick thing. We're going to get you to come with us. We're going to abduct you or something. We're going to convince you to come with us. And then while you are unsuspecting, we are going to shoot you in the head and kill you. So this was like pre-planned, but there was no other motive behind it other than killing this woman.
Yes, it wasn't a sexual assault that turned deadly.
Right.
That turned into, oh my God, I can't believe I just did this. I need to kill you so you don't identify me.
Right, or I'm going to beat you to death. And then when you try to escape, I'm going to shoot you.
Yes, yeah.
It was literally, we find you, we get you to come with us, and then when you're unsuspecting, we shoot you in the side of the head.
Yeah, it's really insane to me. But I have to say that this is exactly why we need to talk about this case.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though there's not a ton of information out there, there aren't a million twists and turns and all these things like with last week with Diane Wolf. You learn the story and then all of a sudden now you learn about the affairs. You learn about all this other stuff that was going on. There's none of that here.
Right. I mean, this could be something so basic as somebody that still works for Aetna is like, oh, wow, this lady that worked for us before was murdered.
Yep.
And it gets like people that work at Aetna start talking about
Yeah.
it or anything like that. I mean, we had made mention that her body was found along a road where there was a construction for a casino going on, a casino that's now known as Bally's Tiverton. Maybe people that work there are going to be intrigued because, oh, this lady was, you know, murdered and dumped not too far from where this casino is being built.
Yep.
There are a lot of different ways where people can become intrigued and interested in a case like this and want to know more and maybe have connections that can
Further the investigation.
help further the investigation. Exactly.
At the end of the day, what I'm really asking our listeners to do right now is share the episode. Share this with your friends. Post it on social media. Do whatever you can to get the word out there and talk about Lyla. Talk about her case. Anything that you might know. Like if you're talking to friends and they're talking to friends and they're talking to family, you don't know what might come up.
We're doing these cases specifically because they're unsolved and there's still more work that needs to be done on them. And by getting these cases out to people and getting people talking about them, there's always that chance that these stories are going to hit the right ears and that somebody's going to have information to help further the investigation. So by you listening to it, fantastic. But by you sharing it, it's 10 times better because it gets to more people and helps further the work that we're trying to do with researching these unsolved cases by helping spread the word about them.
Yes, and the number one thing that I will say, I don't know if you guys follow us on social media. I don't know if you're on Twitter or Instagram, but I will say the one place where I think would be the best to share this would be Facebook. So if you wanted to find our Facebook page, Wicked Deeds on Facebook, we will have a post as soon as this episode drops, and you guys should just share it with your friends right on Facebook. It'll be shareable. They can then share to their friends, and I think that's a really good way to get it out there is to utilize the Facebook page. As I mentioned before, the current detective has said recently that authorities do have a person of interest, and they just need that tiny little bit more to be able to close the case and hopefully bring charges. He needs the public to hear about Lyla's case. He needs them to talk about it, and he needs you guys to share it. You have no idea if you or someone you know has the tiny little tidbit that authorities are waiting for. It could be something so minuscule that you think it holds no weight in terms of finding a killer, but it could be that little thing that closes the case and puts a murderer behind bars almost 45 years later. As Detective Miguel told WPRI, quote, "You took an innocent human life, and there was no need for that. It's time to come forward. It's time to pay the price for the crime." If you know anything about who killed Lyla Poitras, please contact the Tiverton Police Detective Division at 401-625-6717. Thank you all so much for tuning in every week. We're so happy to have you here. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review before you go and follow us on our socials.
You can follow us on Instagram at wicked.deeds.podcast and on Twitter at wickeddeeds. Don't forget to visit our website, wickeddeedspodcast.com, to take a look at any photos from this episode and view our source material.
But most importantly, tune in next week for an all-new episode.